This is Racing Across America with Seth Merrow.
Welcome back to Racing Across America. We're joined now by Jeremy Plonk, horseplayernow.com and Night School. Good morning, Jeremy.
Good morning, Seth. How are you?
So far, so good. Better than last week. I'm on the upswing now. Still a little bit of a cough, but at least the voice is working. It has for the last 3 days, so I anticipate no problems in that category this morning. And we appreciate your being on again on a Wednesday morning. Last Wednesday had a little bit of a technical difficulty, but we slotted you in on Thursday. But back in your regular spot, which means the day after Night School. And Night School was kind of an interesting topic last night. As I understand it, handicapping contests were on the agenda.
Yeah, we talked about the contest tournament circuit. We had a couple of the administrators, Keith Chamlin from the NHC and Ken Kirkner from the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge. And then one of the better tournament players in the country is currently 10th in the NHC Tour standings, Chris Larmy, a 10-time qualifier for the National Handicapping Championship. He was on from his home in Washington State last night and talked a little bit about the strategies and the different kind of contests. And then we also had Pete Fornatale from the Daily Racing Forum's contest blog come on and talk about covering the events and some of the things that make them special and the strategies that he's seen employed that have worked and haven't worked over the years. So it was a good chance to tip your toe into the water of the tournaments or learn a little bit more about them. That archive is available if you go back to the archives and click on last night's chat. The first link at the top of the chat will take you to the audio archive. We were on Sirius XM Radio last night, so you can listen into the show as it was live.
Yeah, and I'm a big contest fan, and Pete does a great job. I've had him on the show before. And you and I had a discussion a couple of months ago about the different kinds of contests and some that don't really play into the game and others that do. That was an interesting discussion, and I agree completely. But NYRA had a really fun contest on Mondays at this Saratoga meet most recently where you could dump in $40. It was a low roller contest. And it was live money. You had to make an across-the-board bet on 5 races during the day. And I found it a lot of fun. As I say, I like the handicapping contest because I think you have to approach things a little bit differently and shake up your handicapping a little bit and look for value a little more than you might usually.
I like this contest to put real money back into the pari-mutuel pools. They're not poaching bettors from the pari-mutuel world into some kind of fantasy realm or something like that. And I think if you've got a stake in the game, having games and fantasy games like that and contests are a good thing if you've got a stake in the industry because it can help develop more players and people to your brand. Maybe I'm not a NYRA player, but on a Monday that contest draws me in. Remington does something similar with a contest they call Thorough Enduro. You've got the Showviver out in California. I think those are good for tracks to lure people into their racing product. And as a consumer out there, I would just hope that folks play games that fit to their style and play games that help the industry because I think that's what it's all about. We need to keep the boat afloat.
And again, more discussion about that. Horseplayernow.com, Night School from last night. And how many sessions left this year on Night School?
We've just 3 left. Well, that was week 37, so we've got 40 weeks. We started back the 1st of March, and we'll end here the 1st of December. So 3 more weeks left in the season. It's a fun topic coming up. We haven't gotten all of our guests together for next Tuesday, but it's going to be a little bit about the mental side of it, and it's going to be about bad beats and bad beat stories. And we all have one of those, but what we can learn from them, the psychology of coming back through slumps, playing through slumps and bad beats. And we're going to talk to some folks who have had those over the years and how they've adapted and overcome those because that's a real part of the game.
It's interesting, and that is a great topic because to me, a lot of the game is also mental. And I've called myself kind of for lack of a better term, a mental player in that I back up a lot of my bets. I know that cuts into my profit, but I prefer cashing tickets. So I'm a big 4-horse exacta box player. I know a lot of people wouldn't go that deep. Now, the odds have to warrant you going that deep. You have to look and be logical about it. But a lot of times, if I get through the first couple of legs of a pick 3, I will cover horses I don't have covered in the last leg. And again, I'll know it cuts into my profit. But for me, and again, I think everybody's an individual, but I'm a better bettor if I'm cashing some tickets. I feel better about myself. And I think it's the same kind of a thing with these situation of bad beats or slumps or whatnot. A lot of the game and a lot of the logic of betting is mental.
Oh, absolutely. And to be able to understand yourself is the first thing you have to do as a horse player. When we do these on-track fan education seminars or we do the online live chats, and somebody asks me, well, how should I play this race or how should I bet today? The first thing I ask them is things about them. Tell me about you.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, what are your goals today? What would make you happy? If losing $30 today is going to send you home and you kick the dog, then there are different wagers you want to be in than if you're the kind of person who wants to win a flat screen TV today or nothing else. And so that's, what are your goals? How much losing can you stomach? I mean, that's really what it's about. It's like baseball. 300 hitters going to the All-Star game, midsummer. If you can hit 300 in handicapping, you're going to do very well, which means you've got to be able to absorb 7 out of 10 losses, even if you're a fairly conservative player in the straight pools. If you want to get into the exotics, you had better be able to lose 6 out of 7, 7 out of 8, and be perfectly fine with that. If you don't have that kind of mental makeup, you're in the wrong pools because it's going to frustrate you to no end, and then you're going to start chasing, you're going to start reaching, and your game completely falls apart at that point.
Yeah, and so again, a lot of it is mental, and so I think it is a great topic to have, and folks can tune into that next week. And as I say, the archive always available at horseplayernow.com. All right, Jeremy, and before we get into the topic here, just talking about horseplayernow.com, topic today, we're going to go back and do a little review of the 3-year-old season 2014, but give folks a little bit of a preview. What, we're maybe a month and a half, a little more than that away from first road to the crown in 2015?
Yeah, the countdown to the crown, 10th season coming up. We finished season 9 last year, went all the way through the Queen's Plate. We hope to do that again. We'll talk with our folks at Woodbine over the winter and strategize and see if they want to be involved in the series again this year. But definitely the first Friday of the new year for the last 9 years, and this will be the 10th year, will be the debut. So the first Friday in January, you'll see the first countdown to the crown come out. And then once again, it'll be in our big preseason annual magazine. Last year we had 150-plus pages. Just ecstatic. We thought we'd get about 50,000 reads of the magazine. That was our goal. We ended up with 180,000 and counting. So it was very widely received, and people loved it. So it's coming back, and looking forward to that Countdown to the Crown preseason annual with a review of all the big 2-year-old races, a preview of the entire trail through the Triple Crown Series, features the big horses to watch list. It has over 300 top 2-year-olds moving to that 3-year-old scene, and who we might look at as potential horses. Everybody who was anybody in this year's Triple Crown season was on that list at some point in time at the beginning of the year. So we did a good job scouting last year, and my team of guys will help me with that as well, and we'll get that started here in the next few weeks. I mean, we've got notes and databases right now, but we'll start production on that now that we're past Breeders' Cup in the next week or so, and it'll take us about 6 weeks to put together, and the magazine will be ready the first Friday in January.
Very good, and let's tie that into our discussion of the recap of the 2014 3-year-old season. And we'll just start out looking early season and how things, just going back historically, and I'd like your take on this. Early season, boy, you can't get married to anybody early season. And we look at it here, going back to the Holy Bull, Cairo Prince wins, and that goes back to the Remsen, where you had Honor Code and Cairo Prince, and you're thinking, particularly Cairo Prince out of that Holy Bull, okay, we're all set here. Ring Weekend early on wins the Tampa Bay Derby. He winds up to be a nice horse later in the year, but on the grass, you start to get into Tampa Bay Derby in March, and the same day out in California Chrome starts to establish himself. Down in Louisiana a little bit later, Vickers in Trouble wins the Louisiana Derby. So Cairo Prince, Ring Weekend, Vickers in Trouble. Yeah, you have California Chrome in there. You also have a horse like Wicked Strong run up the track in the Holy Bull. So the main players are kind of in the mix and sorting themselves out, but the focus is on some other horses, which again, I think just year in and year out shows it's really tough, as I say, to get married to horses, certainly in the 2-year-old season, but in that January, February period of the 3-year-old season as well.
Yeah, the courtship process should start out with being turned on. You should be turned on by horses this time of year, but not married to them. And I totally agree with you in that respect. If you see a horse in the Pennsylvania nursery like Smarty Jones, back in 2003 as a 2-year-old, run off the charts, and I get a guy like Dick Girardi email me and says, "You got to check out this horse we have over at the then Philly Park and now Parks." You kind of put them on your radar, so you start to follow this horse as he goes to Oaklawn, and you watch the first race, and you say, okay, that wasn't so great. It was okay, he won. He wanted a mile. Let's see him go to the Rebel. Okay, that was a little bit better. Then you see him develop into the Arkansas Derby, and you say, whoa, we have ourselves a bona fide Kentucky Derby horse. So the progression is what you're looking for. You're looking to get turned on by a horse this time of year and then put them on your radar to follow and see that progression throughout the spring. I think Smarty Jones is one of the great examples of that. I'm a Pennsylvania guy. I was turned on to him from the beginning on a tip from Dick Girardi, and I wasn't sold on him at all until the Arkansas Derby. And then at that point, I thought, my, we have ourselves a really, really big-time horse here for the Triple Crown, and he almost swept the thing. So that's what you want to be. You don't want to be married to a horse like you talked about early in the year or even at this point for 3. If you're a futures bettor and you want to play odds at the win and get 200 to 1, 100 to 1, that kind of deal like that, I wouldn't talk anybody off some kind of projection along those lines, but make sure you're getting some big-time odds. I mean, anything at this point in the year has got to be 100 to 200 to 1.
And again, Louisiana Derby, Vickers in trouble. Florida Derby, Constitution over Wildcat Red and General A-Rod. Those were both at the end of March. And Vickers in trouble, again, proved himself to be an intriguing horse and very talented, but not at the top level of the 3-year-olds. Constitution winds up with a ding and goes to the sideline. He just came back a few weeks ago disappointed in his comeback effort. But then things start to sort themselves out a little bit. We get into late March and early April, certainly. Wood Memorial, and we're going to watch these two, and I'll tell the guys in the control room, you can just kind of bang these two together as they do rack up. We'll look at the Wood Memorial and the Santa Anita Derby stretch runs. Wood Memorial, it's going to be number 2, Wicked Strong gets it done over number 8, Samrot. Number 11, Social Inclusion will run 3rd. And I also noted in here, going back to the Wood Memorial, finishing 8th that day, FNX, who was a nice winner for Jimmy Jerkins on New York Showcase Day the other day, and is going to face some open stakes company in his next start. But right after this, we'll also look at the Santa Anita Derby, same afternoon out in Southern California. Number 5, California Chrome over number 3, Opportunity, and number 6, Candy Boy, who is bouncing around, doing very well in the 3-year-old ranks also. So now we get into the last major preps and really sort things out, and we're seeing the 2 horses who wind up to be the top 2 favorites for the Kentucky Derby. So again, you start to get into March and April, that's where things really sorted themselves out. And Jeremy, I also noted this year, looking at California Chrome, Wicked Strong, and some of the preps leading into the early Triple Crown races and then the Triple Crown season. The 3-year-olds have held well since the Triple Crown also. Since these major preps and now towards the end of the year, these horses have done very well.
Yeah, this has been a pretty good crop and a fairly durable one. I mean, we lost some big names along the way, the Danzas, the Top Billings, Honor Code. Honor Code's back on the work tab since September, so we look forward to him returning. Danza's back on the work tab at Palm Beach Down, so another one who will return. But those April preps you're talking about is where the curd and the whey were separated. I mean, really, just like that Wood Memorial you're talking about, so many great examples there of what you can gather. Horses that Wicked Strong, not a speed type horse who doesn't handle a track like Gulfstream Park as well. He gets back north and blossoms and runs a big race in New York. And then you have a horse like Social Inclusion who did love the speed track and the 1/3 miles down in Florida. Now he's tested for stamina and distance, and all of a sudden you see these horses are a little bit short. Todd Pletcher will have a million 1-turn milers win at Gulfstream Park, but very few of them will turn out to be even Triple Crown contender types. So it's when you get back up to races like the Wood and around the country and they get out of that situation, that comfort zone down in Florida at Gulfstream, that you really get to see what these horses can and can't do. And the Wood was a great example of that. 2 horses going completely different routes, intersecting at the Wood Memorial. In the winter, it was a horse who obviously needed to get off that speed track at Gulfstream, and the 3rd-place finisher was a horse who obviously needed to be back on that speed track at Gulfstream Park and a 1-turn miler type in Social Inclusion.
And subsequently, a couple of other major preps that didn't produce too much. The Bluegrass, Dance with Fate, a Medal Count, and Pablo Del Monte, and these were a week after the Santa Anita Derby and the Wood Memorial. And then in the Arkansas Derby, it was Danza, Ride on Curl in 2nd, and Bayern running 3rd. So again, we're getting to the point where maybe not winning, but you're looking underneath and you're seeing some of the horses who, as the year progressed, kind of rose to the top. And then subsequently, we do have the Kentucky Derby. Watch the stretch run there. It will be California Chrome as the 5-2 favorite. Number 5 getting it done over a little bit of an upset, finishing the exacted commanding curve. Danza, the Arkansas Derby winner, runs third, and Wicked Strong runs fourth in here. You look down the remainder of this 2014 Kentucky Derby field, though. Tapiture, who ran very well against Golden Sense the other day, winds up 15th in here. Wildcat Red 18th. Vickers in Trouble 19th. Vickers in Trouble subsequently later in the year also wins the Super Derby. So again, it was a 3-year-old crop that held up pretty well, I think, as the year went along.
Well, yeah, I think they took the top 6 spots at the Breeders' Cup Classic when it was all said and done. So it was a good 3-year-old crop, and some of those were new shooters to the scene at the end of the year. Some were horses that had been standbys throughout the year. You know, remember, with California Chrome, you talk about a horse who held up all this year. You're talking about a horse who held up since March of his 2-year-old year. You know, I mean, he had been working early on as a 2-year-old and had been in effective training for, 13, 14 months by the time the Kentucky Derby had rolled around. So this is a horse who was very hard trained and hard raced during the course of the lead up to the Derby and then through the Triple Crown, and maybe it took some of the shine off of him, but then he kind of resurrected things back with a little bit of a second off the layoff bounce forward in the Breeders' Cup Classic.
Absolutely, and now we'll move forward again, and now we hit maybe that second wave period, and it happens every year, and Tonalist was that kind of a horse this year. Wins the Peter Pan on May 10th. That was only the 4th career start. Subsequently comes back and wins the Belmont Stakes. Preakness is won again by California Chrome. So the win by Tonalist upsets the chance at a Triple Crown. Bayern on Belmont Stakes Day, very, very impressive in the Woody Stevens out in Southern California as we get into July. Shared Belief makes the comeback out at Los Al and wins the Los Alamitos Derby. That notable because Candy Boy second and Tonito M third. And I note that because Tonito M a little later in the year wins the Oklahoma Derby. So that's a race that maybe shaped up a little tougher than we anticipated. Bayern winds up winning the Haskell, looking very, very good. All of which sets up the Midsummer Derby right here in upstate New York, and it has the potential to be a kingmaker at this point. Wicked Strong, Toneless, Bayern, any of them win, they zoom probably to the front of the class at this point, but instead we're going to watch the stretch run. It's the Jimmy Jerkins Exacta, but it's the upsetter, 19-1 VE Day, getting it done. Number 4 over number 7, Wicked Strong. Number 6, Toneless. Third, Bayern, the number 2 horse, a very disappointing last in this field. But again, this was interesting because it had that chance to really define the class, and it threw things up in the air a little bit in the Midsummer Classic.
Yeah, the Travers is becoming a little bit of a fluky race in the winners. I mean, you're talking about the Golden Tickets and Alphas and Stay Thirsty and the Fleet Express winning in recent years. Not exactly marquee horses at the head of the division. Now, I know Stay Thirsty went on and had a pretty good second half of the year. But most of those horses were not necessarily one-hit wonders, but below the cusp of the elite horses. They weren't showing up on the Eclipse Award ballot as the top 3-year-olds at the end of the year. And I grasp for a little bit of trying to reasoning why. Anytime I see a stat or a trend, I try to put a why behind it. And one of the things about the Travers is horses are trained a little bit different nowadays. They don't build up to races as much as they once did. They're expected to fire big bullets. And you look how good the Jim Dandy has gotten. The Jim Dandy's not a $250,000 race anymore. It's $600, it's $750. And you had Tonalist versus Wicked Strong already in the Jim Dandy. And the Haskell has become a must-have race. And it's not a prep to the Travers. It's a separate race on its own. And so Bayern cranked to the hilt winning the Haskell. The Haskell winners don't come back in the Travers and run all that well historically. So putting those two close races that are becoming more and more important and more big-ticket items in the Jim Dandy and the Haskell before the Travers is kind of having a negative impact on the Travers, I think. You're still getting good horses in the Travers, but the winners are becoming a little more fluky and horses that weren't necessarily cranked to the hilt to run in those two major quote-unquote preps. And again, with the money involved in the Jim Dandy nowadays and the money involved in the Haskell, neither one should be considered a prep for anything. And I don't think the horses are being trained as preps for the Travers anymore. They're being trained to win those other races. Hello? Hello?
Jeremy, do you hear me? Jeremy. Okay, we will attempt to get Jeremy back on the air and reach out to him in just a moment. Stay tuned for that. And while we reach out to Jeremy, I will just reiterate again, as I am tap dancing here because they're making the call. Jeremy, good morning.
Okay, we're back.
Okay, gotcha. Very good. Jeremy, as I said, interesting comments on the Travers, and let's just move forward from there because subsequently out on the West Coast, we had, again, another 3-year-old, maybe as the Travers throws things into flux, things maybe started to tilt Shared Belief's way with the Pacific Classic, and we will look at the stretch run of the Pacific Classic now. Shared Belief, number 11 here, over another 3-year-old, number 8, Toast of New York Imperative, runs third. But with things on the East Coast not becoming defined, this became much more intriguing on the West Coast, where Shared Belief would miss the Triple Crown, jumps up and beats older horses here in the Pacific Classic.
Well, this was clearly the turning point in the year, I think, now looking back on it, where the 3-year-olds took the baton from the handicap division. You know, you saw other horses in the handicap division starting to step aside. This was the last hurrah for Game On Dude, and a couple 3-year-olds went by him in Shared Belief and the Euro Toast of New York. And the 3-year-olds started to assert themselves at this point in the year and take over as the head of the Classic division. And when you think about this, his horses ran, 3-year-olds ran 1-2 in the Pacific Classic, dethroned Game On Dude, and neither one of them were the horses that we were talking about in the spring. It wasn't California Chrome, it wasn't Candy Boy, it wasn't Byron. And so the top 3-year-olds in California from the spring weren't even the ones assuming the mantle by summer, so you knew that the 3-year-old shift was on.
And it became very interesting as the fall progressed. Tonalist beats older horses in the Jockey Club Gold Cup. Bayern decides to head to the Pennsylvania Derby, does very well there, whereas California Chrome disappoints. Tapiture runs second. Awesome Again out in Southern California. Shared Belief again beats older horses, all of which brings us to the Breeders' Cup Classic, and we'll take one more look at this because, again, it had the chance to be a kingmaker as far as the 3-year-old division, and perhaps Horse of the Year as well. We'll watch number 7, Bayern, again get it done about a week and a half ago in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Number 9, Toast of New York runs second. And California Chrome, 13, a good rebound off of that Pennsylvania Derby disappointment, runs third. Shared Belief, fourth. Tonalist, fifth. Candy Boy, sixth. So again, the 3-year-olds, very, very impressive in the Breeders' Cup Classic. And I'll let you reiterate, we've talked about it already, but your thoughts as far as the 3-year-old Eclipse.
Well, I think California Chrome was never passed in the balloting. You know, I mean, he had the big lead. He built up the big advantage by winning those 4 straight races in the spring, the San Felipe, the Santa Anita Derby, the Derby, and the Preakness, just the third horse in history to win those races. And so he had what looked to be a pretty insurmountable lead, and when others had the chances to kind of take that from him, they didn't until late in the year. I think that his narrow defeat, you know, the margin of victory, you know, a lot of people won't say a margin of victory is that important, whether you're talking football or horse racing, but I think the margin of defeat in the Breeders' Cup Classic is going to hold the 3-year-old title for California Chrome. If he was third, beaten 11 lengths, and Byron ran away with the race, I think people might look at the last 2 races of the year and say, beat him in the Pennsylvania Derby, beat him in the Breeders' Cup Classic. That trumps what we saw earlier in the year. But we have to remember, you know, California Chrome blew him away in the Preakness. He blew Byron away in the Preakness. Then you flip the deal in the Pennsylvania Derby, and you say, okay, well, Byron blew away this horse in the Pennsylvania Derby. They were pretty much on even terms in the Breeders' Cup Classic. So in head-to-head matchups, you got +1, -1, and a draw. So what are you going to take from that otherwise? The Kentucky Derby is the big elephant in the room that that was in the non-head-to-head matchups, and I don't know how you could look at Byron's resume and say if all things are equal head-to-head, that the Kentucky Derby doesn't put things back in the column of California Chrome as a 3-year-old champion. Should be a 2-horse discussion. I think Toneless might get on the ballot as the 3rd horse, and maybe Shared Belief will get on the ballot. It'd be interesting to see who the 3rd horse is as a finalist.
And give me your thoughts now as these horses go out and become 4-year-olds. What are you looking for from this crop? I mean, again, I think it turned out to be a very good 3-year-old crop as it played out in the Breeders' Cup Classic and whatnot. Part of that, though, is the older division fell apart in the last half of the year. But how do you look at these horses progressing into the 2015 season?
Well, that's a good point. I mean, some of it was attrition. Hey, I kind of like the horses who were pretty good in the spring, showed good, talent in the classics, then kind of went to the sidelines and came back at 4. The Mucho Macho Man model, some of those kind of horses. So that puts horses like Danza, I think, as some big 4-year-olds that you want to watch. He's lightly raced at 3. Again, he's back working at Palm Beach Downs. I think Dan's is a horse who could be very good as a 4-year-old if healthy. Honor Code, Shug's horses get better the older they get, and if Honor Code can stay healthy, I mean, he's the kind of horse who's got a lot of talent. Obviously, California Chrome, I don't see a whole lot of stopping him now because in the handicap division, the races are much more spread apart. I mean, you can look at him on the West Coast and figure out what his schedule is, right? It's Santa Anita Handicap. It's Santa Anita Gold Cup, the old Hollywood Gold Cup. It's Pacific Classic. It's Awesome Again Stakes. There's like 4 major races throughout the course of the year in California. He doesn't have a chance to be over-raced as he would have been from 2 to 3, and running so often up through the Triple Crown. So I think that they can be a lot more judicious with California Chrome, which means he could be very successful. Same way with Shared Belief. Obviously, you can't lean on Shared Belief for a whole lot. He's not a very robust horse physically and putting up with a lot of demands and rigors. He's only run a handful of times here at the end of his 3-year-old year. So again, a light schedule for him, and you just look at the natural tendencies of the calendar in California, and you say, look, these horses are going to have 4 or 5 starts next year. They're going to bang heads against each other. Maybe somebody goes on a road trip somewhere along the line and takes on, some good horses in the Oaklawn Handicap or something like that. But really, the handicap division is so spread out now that there are 5 or 6 major dates for the entire year to look at, and I think these horses can all be banging heads against each other and keep themselves sound because they're not going to be over-raced.
Yeah, it will be intriguing. It's going to be intriguing to see where the Eclipse goes and then how these horses do play out next year. I think there's a lot of potential there. But again, as we noted at the top of the interview, it all starts again in about a month and a half, where Countdown to the Crown will reappear. Horseplayernow.com, your nice package every Friday. We look forward to that and discussions on the 3-year-old trail this year. But this was a nice recap of the 2014 3-year-old season. Jeremy, as always, we appreciate the visit. We'll talk to you next week.